couple of talks left, so just a couple to get through, so hopefully talk through some interesting stuff with you. So I want to try something first. If everyone could just pop your hands out in front of you and clap. Super. Now I want you to turn your hands over the other way and clap again. It doesn't sound nearly so good that time, so if I do anything that you like, I want you to clap this way for me, okay? Okay, but this time I want you to put your hands back into the second position, and I want you to take your hands over the top and cross over and interlace your fingers, okay? Now I want you to point your pointies. Just like all the way there, just point your fingers, okay? And in 3, 2, 1, you're gonna turn over with me. One or two, okay, so we're actually quite easy to trick, which has some relevance to what I'm talking about today, which is exercise, chiropractic, and pain science, which ultimately, once the fad passes, comes down to an appreciation of the evidence base surrounding people and pain, which, as healthcare professionals, and more specifically here, chiropractors, we can probably agree that based on the people that seek us out, neck and back pain is quite important stuff. And if pain science becoming popular has had one overriding impact for me, it's been shining a light on a paradigm shift from the biomedical perspective to a biopsychosocial one. And as we've heard a lot this weekend, the word biopsychosocial is a buzz in healthcare right now, which based on the evidence can only be a good thing. But what I'm really interested in is who's best placed to deliver it, because I think that we've got a real opportunity here. Now, one of the main problems with the biomedical perspective was and is reductionism, which works really well for some things, like clocks. If I've got a broken clock, I can reduce that clock down to all the individual components that make up a clock. Cogs, hands, batteries. Find the part that's broken, replace it, put the clock back together, and the clock will work. A biomedical, reductionist approach to a mechanical system like a clock will absolutely be the best way. But let's look at another example. Let's say a cloud is broken in a drought. It's not raining. And we want to take that cloud and break it in half again, and again, and again, until we've got thousands of pieces of cloud. Now, it's simply not possible to find the piece of cloud that's responsible for why it's not raining, take it out, replace it, put the cloud back together, and hope that it will rain. Reductionism doesn't make sense in complex systems, and humans with our neuroimmune makeup are much more like clouds than clocks. Our whole is greater than the sum of our parts, and we only need to look at the outcomes of spinal surgery for back pain to see that a biomedical approach hasn't worked. You know, we scanned people to look for something that's broken, opened them up, tried to cut it out, put the person back together, and I'm not sure any one of us would send our mother for spinal surgery for back pain. Humans, we're much more complicated. We're clouds, not clocks. And this has been shown in the recent Lancet series that our very own Jan Hartwigson was first author of. The evidence is clearly telling us we need to be treating spinal pain in a biopsychosocial way, treating people like clouds, and everything points us towards active interventions, education, and exercise. But everyone knows exercise is good for them, and they should already be doing it. Cue complicated clouds. Because while the message to exercise has been consistent for decades, as shown in this Lancet series, isn't translating into real world, and it's certainly not impacting clinical practice, which is a real problem. How the message is delivered is every bit as important as the message itself. Getting people generally moving a little bit more, sleeping, managing stress, thinking about their food and having a thriving social life is bad for us and avoid at all costs. It's not a paper that I've been able to find, and if anyone has it, I'd be grateful to receive it afterwards, because while I might be inspired by pioneers in our industry like Jan talking about how we need to be getting people in pain, exercising and moving, ask my mum who Jan Hartwigson is or what the Lancet is saying, and her face will probably look as blank as some of the ones I can see right now. But ask my mum about Joe Wicks. And for those of you who don't know, Joe is the founder of Lean in 15, has 3 books in the all-time top 10 best-selling books in British history. He's a handsome chap with a cheeky Essex accent telling people to eat lean foods and get a high-intensity workout in each day. Now, Joe's success is simply undeniable, and I was in Ireland with him recently to witness it firsthand. And Joe isn't doing anything that any other trainer up and down the country isn't doing every single day. But his approachable, likable, low-access methodology had people, and predominantly women, I might add, moving along with him and, most importantly, absolutely loving it. Which begs the bigger question. How is he having such an impact on people's desire to exercise? Because if we can't learn from the people having the biggest impact, I think we're probably missing the point. And I think it largely comes down to his unthreatening appeal. He'll be doing the workout alongside you, either in person or online, saying how out of breath he is, making himself really relatable, can be done in a really short period of time, and anybody can do it anywhere. Would it work without his good looks and cheeky charm? For his demographic, possibly not. And for all the problems, and arguably accurate ones, that skeptics will throw at what he's doing, Joe's found a way to captivate people's imagination, people's beliefs, something fundamental and important when you are dealing with crowds. Now, some of you might have seen those funny videos on YouTube about social conformity, where it's surprisingly easy to condition a group of complete strangers to stand and sit with a bell, no idea why they're doing it, but the fact that everyone else is doing it. And while it's really funny, this is human herd behavior in action. It's something that Joe has cultivated and capitalized on, and it's something that impacts us every single day. You know, do we tend to see females in the gym lifting weights, or conversely, guys in our yoga classes? You know, is this an issue whereby there's specific health benefits to the gender with these types of exercises? Or is this social conformity working against us? And if anyone has the solution to this, I'm all ears, but the fact that it's not a straightforward one doesn't make it any less important to be discussing. We're often asking people to step out of their comfort zone when they're talking about exercise. Out of interest, when did your clients last see you doing something new? Some food for thought. A slight detour, I left London 2 years ago to quit my job as a chiropractor to return to my roots in rural mid-Wales to start practicing healthcare the way that I believed it should be done based on the literature that I was reading. Literature that I am super stoked is reflected in this Lancet series. Now, to do this required me going back to work as a labourer for my uncle's building company to enable me to save up enough money and start chipping away at getting myself going. And before I'm blown off stage by a symphony of violins, there's a point to this story. The chap, every single time a bird, insect, or leopard print slug would land on the scaffolding, the chap that I was working under would tell me a little story about each and every one of them. He was absolutely fascinated, and I really learned a lot about wildlife in this period, which was a tough period because my girlfriend was still living in London, and we'd only see each other once a month or so. I was working long hours. She's a medical doctor, so fortunately was too, and naturally she would suggest that in our 30 minutes before bed we would call up and catch up. Meanwhile, I'd find myself running out of reasons why I couldn't take the call, couldn't chat. Training, website, admin, networking, etc., where what I was actually doing was looking up leopard print slugs. Now, I have absolutely no interest in leopard print slugs whatsoever, but the person that I was being influenced by at that time was so genuinely fascinated that it was literally contagious. I simply had to know more. Everybody's busy. You're busy. I'm busy. Our patients are busy. How are we going to make people want to give us their 30 minutes a day above all else in their life to do the exercises that we give them? It's difficult stuff, isn't it? Because now we're talking about motivating people and inspiring them. And then the conversation might lead on to what type of exercise. And when we look at pain science or the best current evidence, it'll tell us that for sport or performance, the exercise had better be pretty specific. SAID, but when we talk about pain, it doesn't really matter. What does seem to matter is that they're still doing it in 6 months' time. Which leads me to another question I was building towards earlier. Who's arguably having a bigger impact on someone like me who wants to dig deeper into this nerdy stuff and chat with my peers? Jan Hartwigsen or Joe Wicks? A clue, he's probably here this weekend. In fact, I had a selfie with him yesterday. But let's give a flip. Who's arguably having a bigger impact on exercise adherence at a public health level? Jan Hartwigsen or Joe Wicks? Clue again, he's probably not here this weekend and further emphasizes how the message is delivered, every bit as important as the message itself. Something that we've learned from pain science is that our nervous system functions as a memory prediction whereby pain is an output of the system, much like hunger, vision, hearing, or anything else that we experience, and is protective based on a subconscious weighing of credible evidence of safety versus danger. There's a mouthful. Try saying that when you're pissed later on. But while it's beyond the scope of this discussion to go into pain mechanisms, and there are much better placed people to do so, like Ben Cormack's mentorship program, the literature will tell us that manual therapy, ergonomic intervention, needles, exercises, manipulation, we're probably not changing anything structural. But what seems much more plausible is that we are changing the processing of the nervous system, which is really confusing for a great many of us and cripples people searching for the magic exercise that someone hasn't been given yet. But once you can clinically reason what or why you might give an exercise, the evidence base really does liberate us to get pretty creative in our exercise prescription. If our nervous system functions like a memory prediction, and pain is indeed an output of that system, it's important to appreciate that that output can quite easily be tricked and fooled. I can put goggles on you and goggles on me, whereby you're looking through my goggles at your body. Could you picture that? You're seeing yourself through my goggles. We shake hands and some funny researcher comes up and puts a pin in your arm until you say, ow, that hurts. Where? Right there on that man's arm, pointing to thin air. Amazing stuff, but true and repeatable. Just like I fell for that hand trick at the start, so did many of you. And if we had some slick NLP guy up here, we'd have all fallen for it. We are easy to fool. So it stands to reason that if we can do something differently, either from a bottom-up perspective, so the body through movement, and or a top-down perspective, so understanding, we can change the output of the nervous system. And the output we're most interested in is pain. Which leads nicely into the question that I put before this discussion about arguably what was the best intervention for back pain. And among some pretty specific fancy answers, the one I'm making a case for is behind me there. Playing around. If something's more enjoyable, what are we more likely to do? It. Whatever it happens to be. And in my world, that's where we utilize play and all its beautiful forms to change the processing of the nervous system. So how might we take a skill set that you already have and bring it into your clinical exercise prescription? Maybe you are or were a keen footballer. So could you perhaps bring a football in for someone to master balancing rather than just giving them a balance exercise and a clock? Can this exercise be made more difficult? Yeah. Can it be made easier? Of course, if this is a skill set that's something that you've already spent time in. And while it's important to note that in a perfect world, the exercises and goals we would choose would be based on the goals of the person that we're helping. But this takes time and self-investment to develop this ability. I'm really interested in challenging you guys to bring in some of this stuff next week. So let's look at another example, a less physical one. We've all been given a Rubik's Cube this weekend when we've come, so is it possible that you could give someone the Rubik's Cube to work through in between their McGill Big Threes, if that's something that you're into? Changing the processing from the top down. And these are just examples off the top of my head, but the magic is really in you clinically reasoning well. That will dictate whether this is a good exercise or not for that person at that time, and whether it's enjoyable or not will probably dictate whether it actually gets done. My girlfriend recently had quad equina, of all things, that we thankfully diagnosed and surgery went well. Now, she wants to get back to weightlifting and even set sights on a marathon next year. However, her consultant has categorically said that she can't do either, as this will bring on her back pain and quad equina again. Now, without going into the nitty-gritty of the case, there's some really poor information in there that's going to need reconceptualizing before I'm going to get anywhere with any exercises I'm going to give to get her there. Beliefs are absolutely super important. So with exercises, the solution to all this, It's not easy, but I think that we've got a real opportunity to place our profession as true leaders in the management of musculoskeletal conditions like neck and back pain. I guess my challenge to you relates to my slug story. Can you develop a genuine fascination with movement and exercise? Can you make yourself so contagious that people will give you their 30 minutes a day above all else to work on whatever you have clinically reasoned is in their interest to do so? Be it dance, martial arts, gardening, weightlifting, jump rope. I'm endlessly fascinated by movement and exercise, and it's likely why I'm stood here even discussing it. But when did your patients last see you learning something new? Can you place yourself in your community, in classes, cycling to work? How are you using social media? Everybody's on Facebook and Instagram. Is the messages that you put in through that medium working for or against your desire to get people sticking with our exercises? And it'll change depending on where you look, but most agree that less than 1% of spinal pain is serious pathology, and under 5% is nerve root. If 95% of spinal pain is not serious, why then is our treatment of it so serious? Maybe we just need to lighten up, play around, make ourselves contagious, exploit the liberating nature of the evidence base and make things a little bit more interesting. You never know, people might stick around and it could even turn into some money. We're dealing with clouds, not clocks. My name's Luke Davies, thanks for a great weekend. Keep playing.